So, our 2018 annual theme, Awakening. And if you don't have a bookmark, we still have, and actually I'm thinking, just so that people, yes. We're in July. Do you believe that? Halfway through 2018. And of course, we're at the bottom of the first side of that bookmark, Awakening to Our Freedom. So please say with me, I am awakening as a sacred and expired expression of God. Now close your eyes and repeat. I'll do the phrasing. I am awakening. I am awakening as a sacred and inspired expression of God. All right. So, if you are spiritually practicing, what have you awakened to lately? Gratitude. More gratitude. Deeper gratitude, perhaps. What else? More awareness. And I love that because our last month was the power of awareness. Beautiful. So, opening to more awareness. Expansion. Okay. Acceptance. No judgments. Letting go of judgments. Trust. Wow, that's a good one. And joy. Our pure expression of joy. Robert. Blessed. We are blessed, and being aware of that blessing, which makes it all the more rich and juicy to come into that awareness and live that awareness, not just know it, but know it. Excellent. So today's monthly theme is awakening to our freedom. Now you might already say, well, I live in the United States. It's all about freedom, right? Grumblings. Okay, well, we'll sort of get there. What do you want to be free of? You're making a declaration. What do you want to be free of? And I want you to, for yourself, just pick a word, even if you feel like, well, I don't know if this is it, but just pick a word. Do you want to be free of worry, anger, guilt, shame and blame, disappointment, attachments? Are these of mind or of heart? So many of you know that I love the metaphor about the steering wheel and the gas pedal. And the steering wheel is the mind. I know all this already. Are you free of guilt, anger? But you know. But you know, right? And so, one of the things I want to say is, depending on how long you've been in this teaching, when we say change your mind, change your life, mind for a lot of people, changing your thoughts, is about, I did my affirmations, I know this. I did my treatment, I know this. But then as practitioners, we have to say, and is that what's being demonstrated in your life? Because you can know this in your mind, but again, do you know this? And I'm going to say to you that like the gas pedal, your heart is like the gas pedal and your mind is like the steering wheel. And you can steer it all day long, but if in your demonstration of your life you are not free of these things, then, it's like a DNA strand. There are many layers to why things may not be demonstrated in your life in the way that you think that freedom should be expressed. Whether that's the freedom of the joy and love in a relationship, the freedom of your abundance being demonstrated in your life, the freedom of your creativity, because I want to say, I think as we get older, we don't allow ourselves to express and open to that expression as much. And so I'm going to say that these are both heart and mind, because now we have this, again, the gas pedal feeding these things, while in the mind we're like, yeah, I got it. But the way it's expressing, there is something that's stuck, which requires more inquiry, more meditation, more contemplation so if I know this, what don't I know? And that means being open to becoming more aware, which was last month's theme. So, how about the freedom from your story? Stories. The freedom from your stories, because we tend to cause them to linger. And then they tend to cause us to be binded by that story. Do those stories change over time? Scientists, particularly psychologists, have shown, and if anybody remembers the wonderful movie Inside Out, it talks about how those stories change. Now, when I was doing the lesson, I was like, yeah, freedom from victim to victor. And then I thought, well, that doesn't just quite fit right, because then it's sort of like, yeah, victor! And sometimes that's still not in the space of open awareness, of vulnerability, of inquiry. It's still not necessarily, it can be, when you have healed your wound, you are a victor, but not in a way that's like, I went from victim to victor. But instead, there just sort of becomes, as you heal, an understanding. And so to usually get from victim to understanding, if you don't mind me changing that word, to get from victim to understanding requires forgiveness. And I'm not sure all the time as metaphysicians that perhaps we don't create enough space, enough vulnerability, because I know I'm changing my thinking. I've changed my affirmations. I've done my treatments. For those of you, our affirmative prayer we call Science of Mind treatments. But forgiveness means being open and feeling a sense of freedom, and I mean forgiveness of yourself first, really. Because if you don't first know how to forgive yourself, then the next step as far as forgiving others, I can forgive them, but I still live with guilt or shame or blame from whatever happened before. And perhaps that's what's being expressed in your life. Does anybody remember John Bradshaw? Very popular book, and I still believe that I don't see as many books on that subject, but I still think a lot of us need the freedom from the blame and shame. So the freedom to be vulnerable, which means going back to the heart. The freedom to be humble. The freedom to ask, perhaps even yourself, for forgiveness first. And then the freedom and the courage to ask for forgiveness from others. Science of Mind textbook, page 241. in mind, and that's a capital M, meaning the one mind, universal mind, there is perfect freedom. And in this freedom, nothing can bind mentally or physically, and I'm going to add, or emotionally. Nothing you ever did or thought, or that anyone else ever did or thought, can bind you. The very life of God is freedom, and that life lives in you. So how do we bind ourselves? By our, and this goes back to thought. We have binded ourselves from whatever the original story was by our thought and how we responded or reacted in particular situations. And yet recognizing that freedom is the truth of our being, because you are free to choose. Yeah, change. The freedom to choose. We all know we have a freedom to choose, right? And that's something that as Americans we should not take for granted. The freedom to choose. So many more things that we can choose now than we did hundreds of years ago. So freedom is your birthright. And of course, if you choose and something in your life isn't demonstrating quite the way you want it to, you can always choose again. But why would you choose again? What would have to happen first? Yeah, you'd have to become aware, which means being open, which means being vulnerable and inquiring, which, did you know that next month is asking the right questions? You know, Reverend Michael loves to say he's Wonder Man. And I love that because he says he's always asking questions. And that asking the questions is always taking what is being experienced in your life and saying, well, if I really believe that I am one with the freedom and expression of God, why am I experiencing whatever this experience is? And that requires spiritual practice, meditation, contemplation, to keep asking the questions, to go deeper and deeper. Why do we get stuck? Safety. So even though we may be in pain, at least we know our pain. And do we become comfortable with our pain? And the unknown is like, but I don't know what I would experience. I know my pain. And pain becomes like, in the Tethered Soul, which was the book of the month for March, that pain becomes my roommate. And I know my roommate. Or do you? How well do you know your pain? Because you may know your pain, but not the source of your pain until you do the inquiry and the spiritual practice. Why else do you become stuck? I saw hands go up. Beautiful. Because you're basically knowing what you want to see in the world. You're looking at your experience. And then you're saying, I want to change that. I want to change that. But I don't want to change. I want that to change. And as you learn, as you sit with a practitioner, or if you take Science of Mind classes, we don't want to manipulate the weeds, the expressions of what you see. We want to go back to the mountaintop, to first cause. We want to go back to knowing our truth and saying, if our truth is freedom, and I have freedom to choose, then I have a freedom to choose how I see this, how I think about this, and how I experience this pain or whatever is a barrier. But it means being willing to go there. It means being willing to do spiritual practice. Science of Mind textbook, page 295. We have thought that outside things controlled us. Thank you for the cue, Sharon. When all the time we have had that within, which could change everything and give us freedom from limitation and bondage. We get attached to the way we think it should be, which then leads us going, it's like, I've made my decision, I know how this should be, and we go down a narrow and more narrow path until we become to a dead-end alley, and then we're stuck. And when energy is stuck in your life, it's time to rethink new choices. I got to think anew. I got to consider new options, which of course does take courage and faith. So, we usually all say inside out, but it's outside in when we're busy looking outside of us, trying to control the stuff out there to make us happy. Easy to say, not so easy to do, huh? It's when they say it's simple, but it's not easy. Science of Mind textbook. I'll read this first and I'm going to put it in context. Does the thing I wish to do express more life, happiness, and peace? If it does, you know you're on the right track. But if it's done at the expense of anyone, then in such degree we are making a wrong use of the law. So I'm not trying to get political here. But as we were discussing in a retreat with the council and the practitioners, we know we are one. And in this oneness, we know that as what we do unto others, we are really doing to ourselves. Now, regardless of all the politics about how we think we can solve or not solve immigration, it all begins with intention. It all begins with intention. And I'm going to personally say that from a humanity perspective, knowing we are one, putting children in cages is not freedom. There are different ways we can choose. Choose to express that intention. Thich Nhat Hanh says, at any moment you have choice that either leads you closer to your spirit, which is the capital Spirit as one, or further away. Letting go gives us freedom, and freedom is the only condition for happiness. So what are we clinging to? What are we attached to? Are we attached to an opinion such that we don't want to become aware of anything else? If in our heart we still cling to anything, anger, opinions, anxieties, possessions, then frankly, I'll say it this way, we are binded. So how do we spiritually practice total freedom within the heart and mind? Now this is a deep question for you to take away. Where is it, how is it, can I spiritually practice the freedom of heart and mind? And I'm hope that our Center for Spiritual Living would be one place that you can do that. Now, some people might think Freedom is to do whatever I want to do whenever I want to do it. Yeah, that is a freedom. And I'm just going to use one example. I know somebody in my family who their freedom is free to choose to watch TV. And what's fascinating to watch is how enraged they get watching TV. It is hilarious, but it's also heartbreaking to watch somebody say, I have freedom to do what I want to do, and I'm going to sit myself in front of the TV and allow myself to become enraged. And then I have to come back around and say, so is your intention that you're choosing freedom, that I want to have the freedom to be enraged? Maybe. And my guess is that getting the enraged, so I'm going to change that into anger a little bit, that anger doesn't really stem from what's happening on TV. And the reason, based on, the TV is saying whatever it's saying, but what do we know and how do we stand in our truth? And it's not, it takes spiritual practice to be strong, to know where you stand. First of all, to know where you stand, the awareness, and then to be able to listen to something entirely different. And we can all learn from that if we choose to value listening deeply to one another. So, I could have swore at one point that I had heard somebody say that 80% of what we do every day is daily is a habit. But on the internet, they couldn't seem to come to an agreement. So it probably depends on, what psychologist and what experiment. But the point being, on average, we spend more than 50% of our time just doing things out of habit. And this is not awakening, and it's not mindfulness. And is it freedom? Freedom to express your habit. But habits are also what I like to call stale choices. Because habit is choices we made deliberately at some point, and then we stop thinking about it because our subconscious takes over. We all experience that, and we do that for a whole lot of reasons, as far as if every decision we had to make during the day, we'd be exhausted by the end of the day. But there is value, again, in awakening and becoming mindful. Mindful of where we are in the moment and intentional with what we choose to express in the world. I think I've covered some of that. Go to the next slide. And so I know that as we move towards now talking about, so if I want to express more freedom in the world, when we look at our particular situation that has us stuck, we know we want it to change. And we may spend more time talking about how we want it to change than moving into our own space and saying, how do I want to change? How do I want to change seeing what I see? As in, you know what? Today I'm looking for new things. I'm looking for new ways to see through the habits that I have, or new ways to see through the way I see things or think about things. I'm looking to renew my mind. And so I want to speak personally about, I have done meditation for a long time, and I've used all different kinds of meditation methods. I have stuff on my phone. I have different things that I've listened to, both seeing, hearing, different expressions based on classes or workshops or places that I've been. And I forgot to ask the question, is discipline freedom? And some people might feel, depending on how you were raised, that if the discipline was overbearing, then your freedom is not about wanting discipline. But my experience about meditation is, it's not that it provided for me, but much like here, we all are metaphysicians and use science of mind as sort of a structure and a foundation to build our beliefs and understand our truths. I chose to step into transcendental meditation. And why? I like that it actually created a little bit more structure around meditation. And based on listening a little bit more to the philosophy, of course, this was created by a yogi, Maharishi. And of course, what's really fun is Maharishi, when he was alive, actually invited scientists to study those that were doing transcendental meditation. And lo and behold, guess what? Just like neuroscience popular today, meditation changes your brain. And therefore, when it changes your brain, it changes the way that you think. And the video that I have on our website, that speaks to the fact that they have shown that meditation brings you more in alignment with compassion. Heart and mind. And what I have discovered, and I'm not necessarily professing for you, we each need to choose our path of how we awaken and open to the newness. But transcendental meditation for me, especially after listening to their philosophy about what this does, is, yes, thoughts actually bubble up. And that's actually, I'm just going to loosely say, stress bubbling up, and we let it go. And the mantra is to take us beyond that thought and to transcend those thoughts. But the thoughts will bubble up. And then the mantra, and then transcend the thought. And then thoughts bubble up. And it is, I have definitely, even while I'm meditating, watched myself all of a sudden let go to a deeper level. And I was like, okay, I'm on the right path. Now, again, this may not be the tool that you choose. It's just an opportunity to express as far as opening to new things and choosing to see things differently, regardless of how you choose to do your spiritual practice. So I'm wrapping up really a couple months worth here. The freedom with mind and heart begins with becoming aware. And again, we had Neville Goddard's book on the power of awareness. And getting out of habit and letting go of past choices or our story. Letting go and not clinging to whether it's the victim or whether it's the story about how we're binding ourselves. Of course, that's not usually how we tell the story. But if we take responsibility and become open and aware and vulnerable to ourselves, we will discover that. Then we create new choices by doing affirmative prayer, again, going back to the mountaintop and first cause, and using our affirmations, declaring after the I am. That is powerful. Declaring after the I am, and that's why we do the affirmations, both every Sunday, as well as Facebook, as well as our web page. The affirmations help us plant into our subconscious our truths, and then to make a habit of them. So the next book is The Way of Liberation by Arishanti. And it's a little book, so if you're a person who said, Kathy, it's nice you have all these books, but they're too much for me to read, this is a good one. He's very clear. It doesn't have a lot of depth, but, again, coming back to simple, maybe not easy, but simple. The Way of Liberation, some very impactful quotes, including this one. This spiritual teaching also is not to answer your questions, but to question your answers, as in to understand and go deeper with what it is that you believe in heart and mind that is demonstrating in your life today. And it is your conscious and unconscious assumptions, which really, as we think and rethink, become beliefs, that distort our perception and cause us to see separation and division where there is actually only unity and completeness. But that means coming to that realization your way. And Joseph Campbell said, we must let go of the life we have planned so as to accept the one that is waiting us. And when we're in alignment with freedom and the truth of our freedom, things will open up. You'll feel that you're not stuck in that dead-end alley anymore. You'll start to see, hopefully you'll get excited because you'll see so many more possibilities than what maybe you were willing to see in the beginning. I am free in mind, and I am free in heart. I am awakening. One more. And namaste.